Hi, my name is Maceo Lewis. Welcome to ML Sports Talk. That's ML space sports space talk, no underscore, on my YouTube channel. So hit the subscribe button so you can see more of my commentary on sports. Today I'm going to talk about the ring culture comments that have been circulating on social media made by LeBron James and his show Mind the Game with Steve Nash. So I'm going to just summarize. Look, I saw the show and I watched the show because I don't watch the show normally, but I watched this segment because I wanted to just get the context of the quote and not respond to something taken out of context. And so I watched it, and basically, so Steve Nash basically asked LeBron a series of 9 questions that were purportedly raised by fans, and I say purportedly not to say that they're making it up or anything. Honestly, I think there's some selection going on with the questions or whatever, but that's beside the point. The point is, the structure of the show is a fan asks a question, LeBron responds to it, and the third question that was asked had to do with the ring culture. So basically, this is the gist of the question. The question says, why is ring culture so much more prevalent in the NBA than any other sport? And LeBron's basic response was, I don't know. He doesn't know the answer to that question. And he's kind of chuckling. And then he goes on and he basically responds to the whole ring culture thing. And basically, his criticism of the ring culture is that it's the obsession with it undermines the accomplishments of individual great players who don't have rings or who has one ring compared to other players who have multiple rings. And it's a team accomplishment, and that team accomplishment shouldn't be used to diminish someone who had an individually great career, but not knocked because they don't have rings or they have less rings than other players. That's basically the gist of it, and he wants the best players in the world to be appreciated for what they bring to the game, to the history of the game, both present and in the past, obviously, right, and going forward. So that's basically the gist of LeBron's commentary on that issue. And look, I don't buy the premise of the question at all, at least when it comes to football. Look, I can't speak to baseball, hockey, or soccer. I usually don't listen to those debates about, if there are any, about who's the greatest of all time, or any ring argument there. But in terms of football, LeBron and whoever wrote the question is dead wrong on that, because they do discuss who is the greatest quarterback of all time, and rings are certainly a part of that discussion, right? When you talk about Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, and yes, they discard the Peyton Mannings, they discard the Aaron Rodgers, they discard the Dan Marinos, because Dan Marino didn't win one, or Rodgers only won one, or Manning only won two, whereas Brady only won 7. Mahomes won what, 4 or 5? I've lost count already. But those two are in the discussion, and they just disregard everybody else because they don't have the same rings as those two. So that is dead wrong on that. Now, what they are right on is when you talk about other positions in football, like running back, wide receiver, defensive back, linebacker. The ring discussion doesn't really come across when we're talking about who the greatest running back is, or who the greatest linebacker is, or defensive player of all time. That usually doesn't come up. I mean, they may mention, yeah, they won a ring, but they don't discard great players because they don't win rings, or they don't say that a certain player who didn't win a ring is not the greatest of all time. For instance, I think Barry Sanders and Bo Jackson, they're like the greatest running backs of all time, in my opinion, but they don't have rings, right? Randy Moss is one of the greatest receivers of all time. He doesn't have a ring. So, but when it comes to the quarterback, I take issue with that, because that does come up in the debates. Okay, so look, no rings doesn't mean that you aren't a great player. If you're a great player, you've made the Hall of Fame. Because a sports writer, the same sports writers who talk and have these discussions about who the quote unquote greatest of all time are, they're the same ones that vote these players into the Hall of Fame. So look, if you're in the Hall of Fame, like Allen Iverson, Charles Barkley, Steve Nash, there's many great players without rings that are in the Hall of Fame. They are considered to be among the great players. I'm sure those 3 names on this are still in the top 100. Okay, so when we talk about rings, that usually comes into the GOAT discussion, the greatest of all time. Okay, so when you're looking at the great players, then the issue comes up, well, who is the greatest player of all the great players? And that's when the ring discussion comes up. So if LeBron really wants to talk about, well, why are we diminishing all these other players? What he really should be talking about is, well, why are we having the GOAT debate at all? Because when you have the GOAT debate, you're going to be nitpicking and saying, well, this player did this and this player did that. And that's sort of when that debate gets taken out of context, that runs a risk of diminishing the other great players who aren't part of the discussion when you isolate certain categories like rings, right? So that's what we should be really talking about, not necessarily the ring discussion itself. It's kind of like with the MVP debate, right? Only one person can win the MVP. There are many great players, there are many great all-stars who have many great seasons throughout the regular season, but there's only one person that you can vote for MVP, right? I mean, certainly there have been instances where players won co-MVP. That's just how the votes shaked out. But in general, you're going to be nitpicking and you're going to be focused on this and that. And in some way, that somehow diminishes the accomplishments of the other great players who had great seasons that particular season. So why not, address that? But let's stick with the GOAT argument, right? Because that's what we're really talking about here, right? So that's where this whole, issue about rings came up, is with the GOAT debate. People bring up rings because that's what sets the GOATs apart from the other greats, right? It says a lot when you are the best player on your team, you're already a great player, but you make your teammates better to the point where your team fulfills the ultimate accomplishment of winning the chip. That's basically what the ring argument is. It's like, yes, you are all great. You in the Hall of Fame, you Steve Nash, you Charles Barkley, Shaq, all you guys are great. There's no question about that. But what makes this player the best out of all you is that when this player, these particular seasons, when they were on the best player on that team, they got the job done not only once, but twice, 3 times. You can look at players like Bill Russell, who won 11 rings, or like Michael Jordan, won 6 for 6 rings, obviously. The fact that other great players like the Barkleys and the Drexlers, I believe Drexler, actually he did win a ring with Houston, but all these other great players, they didn't win rings. That diminishes no one. It increases the value of the great player that actually did the rare thing, that found the diamond in the rough, that was able to get the championship that the other great players weren't able to do. Okay, so great players make great teams. Great players make their teammates better to get the job done, which is to win the championship. That's the whole goal of a regular season, is for your team, across any team sport, is to win the chip. Okay, so that's what the whole thing is with the ring. Okay, so where did this start? Well, Steve Nash was on the right track when he said the 90s, but come on, we know this is about Michael Jordan going 6 for 6. That's where this all started. Before Michael Jordan teamed up with Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan didn't win anything. Why didn't Michael Jordan win anything? Because obviously his team wasn't ready when he came into the league. He got swept by Boston. I got that, even though he dropped like 63. There was the Jordan rules, right, with the Pistons. But as soon as he teamed up with Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson, they won 3 straight finals, right, against great players like Magic Johnson, Clyde Drexler. Charles Barkley was the MVP that season. Okay, then Michael Jordan took a year off because his dad was murdered, and he and his dad talked about him playing baseball, so he went and fulfilled his dad's promise. Then he came back halfway through the second part of that year, that's the other year, so he was a year and a half off. Okay, and then, but before I came back, I remember this image. Not Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen was sitting down on the bench. He pointed to his shoes, and he was like this, like, come back, come back. And sure enough, Michael Jordan came back, wore number 45. They didn't win the championship that year. They got knocked out by the Magic, who got swept by the Houston Rockets. But the following year, when they got Rodman, they had Phil Jackson. They had a whole bunch of other players. They beat the 68 win Sonics. They beat the Jazz twice. A Jazz team who, by the way, swept Shaq and the Lakers out of the playoffs. Don't forget that. Yeah, Phil Jackson wasn't coaching. It was Dale Harris. But still, Shaq and Kobe got swept by the Jazz. Okay, so let's not forget that. Okay, so Michael Jordan, yes, he didn't win without Pippen or Phil Jackson. Yes, he didn't win when he went to the Wizards. But he was the best player on that team when he went 6 for 6. And the Bulls didn't win without Michael Jordan either. So let's not forget that either. Okay, so that's what the whole GOAT debate is about. That's what makes Michael Jordan the greatest of all time. It's like he did it with his team, obviously, but he was the best player on his team. He made his team better 6 times out of 6. Didn't fail to get it those 6 times. All right. Even Tim Duncan, who's a great Hall of Fame player, he lost once to guess who? LeBron James, right? So that's why it's such a rare thing to be able to do that. It doesn't mean you're not a great player if you lose in the NBA Finals. Absolutely not. Great players lose all the time. But it's so rare. It's so rare to win multiple championships and not lose at that high level. That's what the whole GOAT thing is, okay? So, I mean, look, there's other reasons why Michael Jordan's great. I could point out other reasons why LeBron's great, okay? All right, but when we talk about GOAT discussion, that's where usually the rings come in. So, look, I don't find that great players are disregarded because they have no rings. I do find that what happens is that when people defend LeBron James as being the GOAT, who, by the way, I love LeBron James. I think he's one of the greatest players of all time. I have no issue with that. Right? But I think people diminish Michael Jordan when they're arguing in favor of LeBron James. And they talk about how he didn't face any great teams. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know what 68 wins, Seattle Sonics, the Utah Jazz, like I said, they swept the Lakers. They made it two straight days. They had even the winning record. They had home court advantage because they had a better record than the Bulls one year. So I don't know what they're talking about. But anyway, so look, in summary, if you don't have a ring or just one ring or two rings compared to that doesn't mean you're not a great player. Okay, many great players come and go in the league and they don't win rings. Okay, it's hard enough just to get into the league. You can, in terms of judging, see, LeBron even doesn't even specify what makes a great player. He just says, "Oh, look at their accomplishments." Well, what accomplishments? I mean, yeah, there's many accomplishments you can look at. You can look at a player's scoring average, their career rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, all-star selections, MVPs, first team, second team selections, Olympics, influence on culture, business, social justice. There's a whole bunch of categories you can pick. And look, the bottom line is this is all subjective. Okay, I agree with Steve Nash's philosophical sentiments at the end of this question. I mean, look, it all doesn't matter, right? My opinion of who the greatest is, your opinion, LeBron's opinion, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, you focus on your life, you be proud of your accomplishment you made, and, be at peace, right? Don't care about what anybody says. Don't listen to anybody who says you're not great, okay? But if you have a ring, that doesn't mean you're a great player either. If you were on a great team, you're a great role player like Robert Horry. Look, I love Robert Horry. I would never forget that shot he made against Sacramento. But come on, he's not look, I would like him to be in the Hall of Fame, but if you look at his stats, oh yeah, I see why he's not in the Hall of Fame. Just because you make big shots in the playoffs, that doesn't mean you're a great player. Like you look at the regular season accomplishments and all that stuff that I just mentioned before. But look, if you're a great player with a ring, that tells me that you were so great that you made your teammates better and you got the job done, which is to win the chip. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the whole ring culture thing. So what are your thoughts about what LeBron said or about the whole ring culture thing? Or what do you think? What other criteria should people use when they're judging? Look, like I said, this is all subjective. There's no right answer to it. But that's what makes this fun. That's what makes this fun, is that there is no right answer. We can come up with any factor to justify our positions. And that's why there's so much interest in the NBA. That's why there's so much money in the NBA, because people care. People care. People are paying attention. And, that's why we have these discussions, because we care. So anyway, that's my thoughts about the whole thing. Let me know your thoughts. Again, hit the subscribe button at ML Sports Talk so you can hear more of my thoughts and commentary about sports. Until next time.